Hey, this is Tyler Harmon. Thanks for listening. A while back, we did a full-day Marketing for Founders seminar for early-stage founders and owner-operators. There's a lot of really great insights in here from years of growing startups that I think any founder might find valuable. But before we dive in, just a quick disclaimer. This is a series cut from live recordings that I've edited down to about 4 hours of content. These concepts are easy to grasp, but it's calorie dense and there's very little fillers in here. So take your time with it. So without any further ado, let's get to it and try to keep up. So let's get into a whole bunch of thought-provoking musings, let's call them. And we'll take these musings and then we're going to start building on top of them to have more complex ideas. And I think that is when these ideas are going to start flipping on inside your brain. So, you have a product. Do you have a business? Back when I moved to LA over 10 years ago, I was going to be a real estate agent. I was already this great mortgage salesman. I had this fresh MBA under my belt. I thought people were going to love me. Nobody knows how to negotiate so nice and so enjoyably like me. I was great at multiple offers on the seller side. I was good at getting my offers accepted on the buyer side. I was the best at running the numbers and analyzing markets and forecasting trends. I was really successful at running ad campaigns to promote my listings and help the homes get staged and ready for listing and photographed and positioned. It's no wonder I ended up where I am today, but with all of these things, nobody cares. In LA, there are thousands and thousands of agents in this city. You could throw a stick and you could hit 2 agents and 3 actors. On paper, I was hands down one of the more competent agents that you would ever find, but it didn't mean a thing. There is no demand for another real estate agent. To put this another way, let's say you have to hire a new babysitter. Who are you going to hire? The professional babysitter from across town who's CPR certified with 20 years of experience? Or are you going to hire your best friend's 17-year-old daughter that you've known their whole life? You're probably going to pick the daughter. Does it make sense? Maybe, but that's the way it is. Here's a hypothetical question for you. You're going to open up a lemonade stand in your neighborhood. You're going to charge $2 a glass. And then the guy across the street, he opens up his own lemonade stand and he's going to charge $1 a glass and he's going to undercut you. If your lemonade is the same as his lemonade, you are in trouble. And so when I say the same, I mean a perceptible difference to the customer. If they can't see the difference, there is no difference. Maybe you can tell them when they walk up and you could explain to it, but unless that's how you actually sell to your customers in your real business, it's a moot point. So the question is there a good reason that you can charge $2 a glass when the guy across the street sells his for $1? If it's just down to price, you have a commodity. And from there, it's a race to the bottom. Because another neighbor, he's going to open up a lemonade stand, he's going to charge 50 cents a glass. And another guy's going to charge 25 cents a glass. And that guy, he's probably going to lose money on every glass that he sells. And he just did something really dangerous, is he set the going rate for that. I digress. Okay. So, is there anything that you can hang your hat on to charge $2 a glass? Like, your lemonade is served in a really cool to-go cup and it has a crazy straw. Or it's lemons from your own trees, or you use natural sweetener, or it's ice cold. Maybe you soak the rinds in the juice so you can absorb all the natural oils of the lemon and it's really delicious. Or it's handmade by 2 cute kids with no front teeth. Or the money that you make goes to the kids' college fund. Or a portion of it is donated to really needy kids. You see here, now you have a brand. Why would anybody go to the other lemonade stand if they knew the difference? So we're going to talk about this more later on, about knowing the difference when we get into behavioral economics. And that's a lot of fun. But what I'm trying to say here is that anything can be a brand if you're thoughtful about it and you take your time. and actually take your time. That might be the theme of this whole thing today. But I heard this analogy in an article one time. They're talking about your brand versus a plain white t-shirt. Like the plain white t-shirt is just a commodity and there's nothing special about that. But now you got companies like True Classic. All they do is sell plain t-shirts and they charge $20 for them and they are blowing up. So that's not really a good argument. You can make a brand out of anything today. Speaking about lemonade stands, you can't sell this lemonade online, most likely. So let's talk about appropriate business models here for a second. So I heard this example before about a talk therapist. So just for fun, let's assume that there are 3 ways that you could run a talk therapy business. Maybe 1, it's a phone number that you put on a website and people just call in. If that's the case, then the first few times that people call in, it's probably got to be free because you got to demonstrate the value first. It's on, because it's just a phone number. It's a random phone number. But if it's in an office like it normally is, it can't be free because if it's free, it's probably a scam or it's really weird. And when people go into an office, they expect to pay money or have their insurance do it or pay a copay or something. Or a third way you could do this is at a public place like a mall or a park and you got a folding table. And you could do this, but it better be quick and it better be cheap and informal the way that you set the whole thing up. So to be clear, with these 3 different types of business models, all 3 of these could work, but you'd have to switch up the feel and the value that people get, the context of it, everything. You can't expect to change something big like this and then assume that everything else is going to stay the same. So what you're going to have to do is whatever your business model is and whatever you're doing, slow down and poke holes in it. I call this preemptive cynicism. So what I really want you to do is try to experience your business as somebody who doesn't care about you. It's not your friends, not your family, it's not your spouse. And you're all very biased about what you're selling, but your customers are not going to be. So you got to ask yourself, why would somebody spend their money on your product? Is there real value there objectively? Like, are there free or cheaper alternatives they could use? Like a free app versus a paid app. Why would they choose yours? Maybe we're just building this up in our heads because we like it so much. Like if you had to buy this from a stranger, would it still be as good? The thing that I learned in sales the most was that the fear of loss is greater than the desire to gain. So these people are thinking, if I'm wrong about this choice, how bad do I get burned? So besides losing business to your direct competitors, another competitor is somebody just doing nothing. It's safer to just not make a choice and just stick with what you got, the status quo. And this is especially true in business-to-business products, because one of the big motivators that these decision makers have is to not get fired. And so if they're getting this pitch from you and you're promising the world and all this growth of their business, but deep down they're thinking, oh my God, this is a lot of money to sign up for this thing. If I'm wrong, I'm going to get fired. Then they're just going to stick with the status quo and not make a choice at all. So when you're practicing this preemptive cynicism, ask yourself, are they going to understand the value of this product? Like, how much effort needs to go into explaining this? You understand it because you made it, and all your friends because you talked about it for years when you were setting this thing up. But if I had a nickel for every time I heard someone say, every person I meet and explain this to likes it, I just can't sell this online. Maybe they're just being nice, or maybe you're saying something in person that's not in your ads or on your website. Maybe you're using your hands a certain way when you're explaining it or something. How easy is it to translate what you're telling these people one-on-one and then do that at scale with ads in your website? I want you to really force yourself to pick your business apart and stress test it. But probably don't ask your friends and family because they're probably going to say some stuff that you're not going to like. So do it yourself. The other thing that we could talk about up front is timing. Most business owners and founders, they have this grand vision of the grand opening. 99% of the time, this is way too much pressure to put on an event, the grand opening, because it's when we start to get really hasty. We arbitrarily pick this date that we have to hit for our grand opening, and we keep delaying all the marketing stuff. And the next thing you know, we're supposed to have this launch a week from now, and we haven't thought about it at all. So we start getting in a big hurry. The only time it really matters is with fundraising, when you need to show momentum, like you're tracking the progress for an investor, like venture capital investments, or there's a big ticking clock on a crowdfunding website where it's public and everybody can see it. You want the herd mentality to pick up because things are moving. But if you're selling things one by one online to customers or in a bakery or something, it doesn't matter. Nobody else is going to see this stuff. So when it comes to marketing, it's going to take time to figure these things out, and you're going to have trial and error, and you're going to be wrong plenty of times. So just get started and save your strength and save your money. Don't just run out and just put all this money and all this effort and haste into getting some marketing campaign up for an arbitrary date. Soft open. Start there and just harden your open as you keep going. So Warren Buffett, he's got this great quote about how to make a snowball. He says, in order to make a big snowball, you need two things. You need a lot of snow and a really big hill. So these things take time to become big. So with Rally Road and Legion M, we had to grow these companies member by member, investor by investor, install by install. Now, these companies, they have very real large tribes of hundreds and thousands of people. And so when they snap their fingers, they can move heaven and earth and fund like a $850,000 William Shatner documentary in 3 days over a weekend. Or they could fund a 1980s Lamborghini Countach, like a $400,000 car, in 4 minutes. I saw it. I was blown away. But this didn't happen overnight. This would have been impossible back in 2018 when they were getting started. But with the baby steps, they accumulated these people over time. It's no wonder they call compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. But I can admit it's very hard to be patient with this growth. So the question that I get asked a lot is, how long is this going to take? I'll say this, be careful about asking that question too often. There are plenty of people out there who will just give you an answer. In crowdfunding especially. I get this all the time. How long is it going to take to raise $5 million? And a lot of people in my position, they're just going to spit out a number to them. It's total conjecture, and they will say it with such confidence. And then these poor founders, they're going to use this as their North Star to plan with. I've mentioned it before, the fake it until you make it. It's so unethical to give bad advice like this, especially when it can lead to these founders making fatal mistakes. So, back in my real estate days, Tracy King was one of the big agents that I looked up to. She called herself the King of Eagle Rock, was this neighborhood that she sold in for 30-something years. It was one of the hottest neighborhoods in the country a few years ago. Everything was going into multiple offers, and it was way over asking price, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people at every single open house. It was a crazy time. But with all this activity going on in these open houses, all these agents would just love to show off how smart and how experienced they were. So they'd get out their crystal ball, and you could hear them talking in the open house, these agents. Oh, we're probably going to get 30 offers and probably go 10% over asking. We'll get this thing sold after 3 days on the market. What? How do you know that? But if you ask Tracy, I've seen people do this to her at every single open house I was in, because I'd love to mill around and just listen to her talk to other agents and the buyers and other sellers that were coming in. In my opinion, she's the only one qualified to answer this question because she's the only one with the amount of experience that she has. So when someone comes up and asks her that question, you know what she does? She shrugs her shoulders and she says, "Who knows?" The more you know, the more you realize that you don't know shit. So anybody who starts answering these questions so haphazardly, they either don't have the stones to be honest with you, or they're worried about looking smart, so they start guessing like it's fact. Or worse, they actually believe it, which means they're nuts. So be careful about asking questions like this to people. Unless you're doing it to test people. That's a good reason. It's a really good way to size people up, actually. But the motivation behind asking these kind of questions is because we're behind and we're in a hurry. We forgot to put gas in our car until it's too late, and we still need gas, but the gas tank is not going to fill up itself. And so we get hasty and we try cutting corners and we get into a huge rush. I will tell you this, that nothing good comes from haste. The only people who benefit from haste are the vendors that you pay for their time and then they leave. So we'll get into this more, but this is when I say things like, "Man, I really wish you didn't spend your money on that." So here I will tell you, slow down and don't go all in either, just because you need a big win. That's like burning the boats on the beach. There's this great story about Cortez in Mexico, and it was the same thing with Alexander the Great. They landed in some foreign country to fight some foreign enemy, and they burned the boats so they had no option of retreat or escape. It was conquer or die trying. It sounds really noble, and it sounds amazing way to fire people up. But for startups, it is wildly inappropriate. Unless you got like 6 months to live or something like that, then go ahead and burn the boats. But we're not Alexander the Great. We're not Cortez. So don't do this with a specific campaign or with your budget or with your runway or with some deadline, because you will be wrong. You're going to need reserves. You're going to need to switch gears at some point. There's a saying in construction is that everything takes twice as long and it's twice as expensive. So be conservative and plan for setbacks. There's going to be surprises. It's like I always say, rule number one for startups is stay alive. So speaking of stay alive, let's talk about the hierarchy of needs really fast. So most people have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Abraham Maslow, he was a psychologist. He was trying to explain why people behave in certain ways. And what he realized was that behaviors and motivations, they change based on different needs being met. So the more needs that you have met, the more you can start to aspire and rise. So it starts with physiological. There's physiological needs, security needs, belonging, social needs. There's esteem and ego needs, and then self-actualization. So physiological needs, that's true survival. You need food, you need water, and you need air to breathe. Then, once you get those needs met, you need security. You need a roof over your head, you need to feel safe, and you need to be healthy. Once those are met, then you go into belonging. You need intimacy, you need family, you need friendship. Then you go into esteem and ego. You need respect, and you need status, and you need freedom to do things. And then the last one is called self-actualization. This is life fulfillment and spirituality. So when I was thinking about those, I decided to come up with a startup's hierarchy of needs. So you start with the most basic needs that you have, and then you start working up. So for a startup, it's stay alive today, which means you need to have cash. You need to have some sort of resources to keep the doors open. And then once you have that, you need to be able to stay alive tomorrow, which means you need to get sales today. You need to sell something so you have more cash coming in so you can have more resources. And once you're able to get enough sales, then you go into the third one, which I call nurture, which is basically stop the bleeding. You need to be able to manage your expenses and build processes for things and build some kind of baseline for expectations. And then growth is the next one. And that is reaching profitability and building repeat customers. And the last one is expansion, where you can scale up and add new products or explore new markets or broaden your reach or refine your reach. Okay, let's talk about different business models. There's a few ways that we can look at business models, so let's start with an easy one. Software versus physical products. So if you have a software product, you build it once, and then you can sell it indefinitely. With this, there are some marginal costs with software, like if a lot of people are using it, you need more servers or you need maintenance. But after it's built, the only cost you should have, aside from overhead, is the cost of bringing in customers. Everything else goes straight to the bottom line. That's why people like tech so much. But the opposite side of that are physical products. These are things you have to build every single time. But I want you to be careful. Just because you use tech doesn't mean you're a tech software business model. And it's easier than you think to get confused here. That's what happened with Tesla. They were valued as a software company, even though they make physical products. They make cars. Every single time they sell a Tesla, they got to build another one. There are the cost of goods, there's the logistics, there's the warehousing, there's the quality management stuff like Six Sigma. There are fixed costs like labor in this space. You got to pay the employees and you have to have the factory to make those things. So you have cost of goods sold, which is your variable cost. The more products you sell, the more goods you need. Similarly, service products. There's no cost of goods sold, but you might have labor as a variable cost. So if you have like a physical therapy business or a massage service or a cleaning service, you pay these people by the hour for each job. But depending on how easy it is to find customers, it might be a fixed cost. You might have to pay them no matter what. But that's the difference between software and physical companies. So the other way that you can think about this is the capital of your business. Are you bootstrapped or do you have to go out and raise money? Bootstrapping, that's simple. You just start. Maybe you saved up some money or maybe you asked some friends and family to invest a little bit, but it's just you out there. If you can write code or you can build your own products, you can just get started and start bringing in revenue right away. When you do this, you don't have anybody to answer to. You own 100% of the company and you can steer it any way you want. You have full control. But you do have to grow slow. So if there's competition out there and they have funding, they could eat you alive. But with funding, this is usually for big undertakings where you don't have the resources to do this yourself. So you need to get buy-in from somebody who's going to write you a check. This is where you hear about seed rounds, like Series A and Series B. It's also where you hear about crowdfunding, which is getting very popular now, especially in the last year or so, because of what's going on in the venture capital world with interest rates. But when you do this, you give up a portion of your ownership in your company in exchange for the money. And then you need a board and you need advisors and you have board meetings. And now you have all these people barking orders at you, even though you're still supposed to be the boss. Not to mention that when you take this money, people, they're going to want that money back one way or another. And the way they get that money back sometimes may not be the way that you anticipated on paying them back. So be very aware when you start to look at those term sheets of how they might get that money back somehow. The complicated part about fundraising is that in addition to figuring out how to actually market to your customers, you have to market to the people writing your checks. It's an entirely different and time-consuming marketing campaign. And it's likely that what entices a customer to your business is not going to be the same thing that entices an investor. In my experience, investors They don't care as much about the big idea that you have to change the world. They're not worried about that as much as you think they are. So let's talk about venture capital a little bit more here. So these are firms like Andreessen Horowitz, Sequoia, Y Combinator. They're an incubator, but they do venture capital too. You meet them, you give them your pitch deck, and they write you a big check. Usually, it's several investors. They come in and they all write checks together. There's one lead investor. Typically, what they do is they all kind of sit back and they're just waiting for somebody to jump first. And when that happens, then they all pile on and you get all these big checks, and it's very exciting. There's a few factors that these people pay attention to when they're going to decide if they're going to invest in you. Your growth, your potential in the niche that you're in. So growth is the obvious one. Most of the time, they want to see your numbers going up. They're looking for the hockey stick growth, they call it. It's the user growth, the sales, the website traffic. This is data that they need to hang their hat on. We have this illusion that these venture capital funds are these visionaries that can just see these big ideas, but that's not what's going on here. Everybody else does the same thing, including venture capital funds. They even do this in the movie business. If you're a small actor who doesn't have a lot of business that they've done before, they're going to start asking these actors at the audition how many followers they have. Oh, I got 5,000 followers. I have 20,000 followers. It doesn't really matter for the small role that they're going to play. Did they do a good job? But it's just another data point, and they use this when they make their decisions. It's the reason why The Rock gets so many movies made. He has, like 300 million followers on Instagram. Who knows? And also, it's the same reason why in B2B, they're so worried about choosing a company that they're going to work with because they might get fired. So what they do is they find some sort of thing that they can hang their hat on. This type of thinking, it's called defensible. So defensible thinking, it's easy to justify. There's rationale to follow. You can see the numbers. The opposite of that is called indefensible, where it's just intuition. You can't back it up with numbers. So that's growth. You need to be able to show growth to the venture capital guys. The other thing that they look for is the potential. How big could this business get? They're not looking for nice business models where every year they have a 20% return or something like that. These guys, they're betting on 00 on roulette. They're not betting on red or odds or evens. They are looking for huge windfalls here. So because the majority of the companies that they're going to invest in are going to fail. So the winners, they need to make up for all these losses and then some. Again, this isn't some hedge fund where they're looking for a nice return on everything across the board. This has changed a little bit in the last year, but not much. Sequoia came out last year and they retracted their old mantra that used to be growth at all costs. So they still want to see big potential here. And then the third thing is their niche. Most venture capital funds, they don't invest in everything. A couple of them do, and they're all across the board, but most of them, they have a nice little foothold where they feel comfortable in investing in things. We invest in women founders who are doing stuff with crypto in the B2B world in Europe. So if you're a man or you're not B2B or not crypto, they probably are not going to invest in you. But most of the time, they still take the meetings to be polite, especially if it was an introduction from somebody else. So when you get turned away from a lot of these pitches that you do, it could just be that you don't fit with them. They may say, you know what, if we did invest in companies like that, we would totally write you a check, but we don't. Because having these niches, that's how they attract investments. This isn't just their money. At the end of the day, these venture capital firms are just investment funds to put the money in. It's like a teacher pension fund investing in a certain firm, and that's where they get this money. And so one way that they attract these people is by saying who they invest in, and then that attracts these funds that come in. On the opposite side of fundraising, there's what's called crowdfunding. It's been around for a while, but there's a few newer ways to do it. The one that most people know when it comes to crowdfunding is Kickstarter and Indiegogo. It used to be for physical products. Oh, we're going to create this product, but we need to do a big manufacturing order, so we're going to do pre-orders. And once we get enough money for pre-orders, we're going to submit the order, and then everybody gets their stuff. And now the big thing that a lot of people do is they get perks if they order such and such amount, or they back the project by a certain dollar amount, like, oh, invest in our movie and we're going to put your name in the credits if you invest over $1,000 or something. So that's the rewards, perks, pre-order version of that. Kickstarter, Indiegogo. The other version of this is for donations and nonprofits. It's like a foundation. It's going to raise money to help some kind of special interest, because legally these guys, they can't give you anything in return for your investment, but you can still donate on here, and that's how they do crowdfunding. And then the third one, this is the newest one, and this is the cool one. It's equity crowdfunding. It's basically like an IPO of a company. It's regulated by the SEC. There are all sorts of hoops that you have to jump through legally to do this stuff. It can take months. It takes thousands and thousands of dollars to set these up. There are big platforms that kind of handle this stuff for you, like StartEngine, WeFunder. So what you do is you're basically selling shares of stock in your company in exchange for this money, so you can make robot dogs that vacuum your floor or whatever. So that's a cool way to raise money now. The challenge is that if you're using these big platforms like Kickstarter or StartEngine, they will tell you that you get all this exposure by being on the website. But there's so many things on these websites. It's not like they're going to feature you every single day and promote your company this much. If you're doing well on there, then they will, because they want to attract other people to put their business on there. But it's like that old saying, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? If there's a company that tries to raise money on Kickstarter, but nobody goes to the website, does it raise any money? No, it doesn't. So what happens most of the time is you have to do some sort of promotion or marketing, like advertising. So if you're doing pre-orders, there's no equity there. As long as your return on your investment is positive, like you spend $10,000 but you bring in $20,000, after your cost of goods, if you're still positive, you're golden. But when you're selling equity in your company, it's not enough that you're positive with your return on your investment there. You have to think about the equity that you just gave away. Are you diluting the shares in your company so much by giving away pieces of your company for pennies? So be very careful when you start thinking about advertising and equity crowdfunding. Okay, 2 more things when it comes to strategy, and then we're going to get into the thick of this thing here. So I call this the water analogies. Think about different bodies of water: puddles, swamps, wells, oceans. They can be either widespread interest or narrow interest, and then deep interest or shallow interest. So obviously, a puddle is narrow and shallow. A swamp is wide and shallow. Wells, they're narrow, but they're very deep. And the ocean is both wide and deep. So when you just hear that, most people think they want an ocean. But most of the time they end up picking swamps, like comfortable dress shoes. It might be widespread, but how deep is that interest in comfortable dress shoes? It's probably not that deep. So try to find a way to turn that swamp into a well, like comfortable dress shoes that you could run a marathon in, or comfortable dress shoes that make a statement. Now you have people that might actually have more interest in this. They want to have really interesting looking dress shoes or something that are comfortable at the same time. But if you do pick a true ocean, you're just going to get swallowed up by a whale, like smartphones. Really? You're just going to go try to make a smartphone? I mean, you totally could, but maybe instead you try to turn that into a well on its own. It's going to be easier that way. Like smartphones for dogs, and they use their wet nose to call you at work. Or something more serious, it could be like cell phones that prioritize privacy. Like there's no cameras or microphones on it, or they're hardwired and you can unplug them, or there's tracking features that you can cut off. So if you could turn an ocean into a well, that might be a way to go. Or just choose a well. Like I always think of like a book about how to clean and care for your vintage Gibson Les Paul guitars. Like it's narrow because there's probably not a lot of people. You're not talking about hundreds of millions of people that are going to care about this. But the people that do are going to be fanatics. So if you're not going to build a well, what you probably have to do is learn how to cross the chasm. So crossing the chasm, this is something that people say. It was from a book in 1991 by Jeffrey Moore. It's an awesome book. So in addition to the E-Myth, I suggest that everybody go out and read Crossing the Chasm as well. It's been revised in the last couple of years, and it's more about tech companies, but I actually still like the original. It's fun to see how all the old examples, they still hold up. Like they talk about old Macintosh computers and how they were able to get them to adopt. So he describes what's called the technology adoption life cycle. And it's kind of like a bell curve. There are innovators on the left side, and then there are early adopters. And these people, they make up a very small percentage of the people. And then you have the majority, which is the big hump in the middle. And then on the far right side, you have the laggards. So the innovators, these are the people that seek out new things. And they wait overnight for the new iPhone in the parking lot because they have to be the first to try it. Then there are the early adopters, which are a lot like the innovators, but they don't have to be first. They like to just try new things. Then you have the majority, and these are the people that wait. The early majority, they either wait because they like waiting for the sake of waiting. It makes them feel smarter. Then you have the late majority, which is the second half of them, and they wait for the price to go down. And then on the far end, you have the laggards. These are the people that still have a VCR flashing 12 o'clock. These people are irrelevant. You don't have to worry about them. But the chasm that you have to cross is in between the early adopters and the majority. Because the majority, they don't buy for the same reason that the early adopters do. The innovators and the early adopters, they buy for the same reason. They like to try new things. But the majority, they don't. And so what happens a lot in marketing with startups is that they have really early success and they raise all this money, and now they got to step on the gas with ad spend, and they hit a wall because what worked at the beginning doesn't work when you start to grow. And that's because you just hit this chasm and you're trying to communicate to the majority the same way that you were trying to communicate to the innovators and the early adopters. And it just doesn't work that way. So when you run out of these early adopters with these spending algorithms like on Facebook and Google and YouTube and TikTok and wherever else, these marketing algorithms, they don't know who else to touch because they've already hit all the early adopters, and now they have to go spread out and find somebody else, and the message doesn't resonate. This is all in context too. Like an early adopter isn't an early adopter, period. They might be an early adopter in one context, but the majority or a laggard in another one. Like me personally, I might try a new budgeting app for fun because I like trying new apps. But I'm not going to be an early adopter when it comes to virtual reality goggles. I'm probably going to be a laggard there. I don't know how interested in that I am. So if you are going to market in an ocean, then you're better off going after the early adopters in there than just trying to hit this majority all at once. But when people pick oceans to begin with, it's because of how big this ocean is. Like, that's why people get in trouble with venture capital, is because of this huge potential. And they're trying to make a big splash in this giant ocean, and they're just a drop of water in there. And so it gets really troublesome also when you base your business on economies of scale, because you're going to lose money on every single sale until you get to 1 million units, and that's when the economics start to make sense. But if it works with early adopters and then it breaks when you get to the majority, then you could be in big trouble there. So it's best to start with a niche of an ocean and make it a well, and then figure out how to cross that chasm once you start to get going there. Because hopefully, if you did find that niche and it worked with the early adopters, you can stay alive long enough to make it work for the majority. But this book is amazing. There's a lot that we could go into that I just don't have time to do that right now. So I would recommend reading it or learning about use cases and beachheads and all sorts of tactics on how to actually cross that chasm.
Thanks for listening. Next episode, we're going to talk about some things I say all the time to my clients, like the myth of building a better mousetrap, and people doing business with people they like, and a few trick questions with some really interesting answers. In the meantime, if you have any questions, suggestions, or need help with your own marketing, check out tylerharmon.com or the Rad Dad marketing website at raddadco.com.